Bulluck. Karen is a risk-taking coach and founder of Daring To Transcend. She partners with women leaders to push beyond the limits of their leadership, career, and life so that they can make a bigger impact in their work and beyond. Karen was the first woman promoted to Executive Vice President at AM Best Company. Her career was marked by taking the risks to make many cross-disciplinary changes and have an impact on a wide variety of people and processes. An ardent traveler, she loves to explore new cultures, new ideas, and new ways of doing things while learning from and valuing the wisdom of the past and the present. Karen is an engaging and an inspiring speaker and a contributing author of 3 international best-selling anthologies. Her latest novel, Discovering Power, will be released on May 24th, 2023. I want to welcome Karen A. Bulluck. Welcome to BrandsTalk.
Thank you, Bridget. I am really excited to be here. Speaking of traveling, I am coming to you from the Dominican Republic today. So my background and my internet isn't perfect. Please understand why.
Dominican Republic is a beautiful place to be and to hang out and just chill a little bit. I know this place. I think I've been there 20 times while I was flying for an
Oh, wow.
flight attendant. It's 25 years ago, but still, I remember it. It's a beautiful place to stay. So I'm very happy for you. So you are not only on a chilling trip, but you're also working because you are launching your new novel, Discovering Power, not in March, but in May this year. So it's in 3 weeks, right?
Yeah, 3 weeks from today, actually, I'm launching the book. And I'm also doing an event around the book next week for people that are interested in joining a virtual retreat that talks about some of the themes from the book. That's next week. So I've got a bunch of things going on.
A bunch of things going on. But before we dive into your book, we want to get to know you a little bit better. We already did one podcast episode. I think it was 2 years ago already. Or one of the first ones. But now there has been a lot of changes. You have evolved as a strong personal brand and you have published 3 books in the meantime. Now, let's recap a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your personal journey. Let us know how your journey was until now.
Yeah, well, I started my journey that I guess I'm on right now, probably close to 10 years ago, believe it or not, when I was still working in my corporate career. And I started to feel like something was missing. I started to feel like I wasn't really living up to my full potential. I wasn't using all my skills and talents. And so I went on a discovery journey of my own to try to figure out what I would look, post corporate career, because I felt like I really couldn't fully express myself and really use all of my skills and talents within that corporate career. I went on a journey of self-discovery and I left corporate about 5 years ago now, believe it or not. Spent some time initially taking care of my parents for a few years and then really launched again when I met you a couple of years ago with the first book, Significant Women. And my journey has evolved because I started out, I knew I wanted to do some writing. I knew I wanted to do some speaking. I knew I wanted to help women in corporate environments or not even in, women in general, because I know women have a hard time sometimes really expressing ourselves and really taking the risk to put ourselves out there. And my brand, to talk about brands has really evolved and it's changed recently because one of the things that I've really found in working with my clients and in talking to women out in the world, that taking risks is such an important aspect of success and such an important aspect of being truly fulfilled and living up to our potential. But yet as women, we're not really trained to take risks. We're not really socialized to take risks. But so, because of my risk taking background, including what I did at work and the fact that I was an aerobatic pilot at one point in my life, I felt like I was uniquely positioned to help women really get a handle on how and when and why to take risks. So that's how my brand has evolved. My story, short version of it in the last 2 years since we talked last.
Yeah. It's really interesting. You are a risk taking coach now. And as you say, it was a journey. So, how was that entrepreneurial journey for you? Because you didn't know at the beginning that you are going to become a risk taking coach. And I haven't heard about risk taking coaches, that there are risk taking coaches out there in the first place. Yeah. So, how did you come up there? How was your journey? What challenges that you were faced getting there, finding your sweet spot, finding your singular thing, finding your positioning in the market to break through the clutter, to actually own a specific spot in the minds of your audience.
Well, it's funny because even before I can remember this incident so clearly in my mind, even before I left corporate, I had this idea one morning when I was driving to work. And when had my part of my commute was driving around a beautiful lake. And I remember so clearly I was driving around this lake and I thought, what I can really help people with is risk taking. Right. So I knew this even before I left corporate, but I didn't take the risk to do that. So, so I'll confess I didn't take the risk to do that because it felt like, well, there's nobody else out there that's a risk taking coach. And maybe it's too narrow. And I want to talk about leadership. And really, I'm all about women's leadership. So I said, I'm going to position myself as a women's leadership. And I did that for a while, as you know. And it just didn't feel like me. It didn't, not that risk taking isn't a part of leadership, because it absolutely is. It's a really important part of leadership. So it's not like I still don't coach around leadership. But I really started as I started to work with women, as I start to go out and give talks at networking events and giving talks for organizations. What really resonated with both me and the people I was talking to was the whole concept of risk taking. And, as I mentioned, I was an aerobatic pilot many years ago, but I learned a lot about risk taking then because that's a pretty extreme risk, especially for a woman. I think when I was doing it, first of all, there were not very many women pilots. And second of all, of the women pilots, only 1% of them were doing aerobatics. So I was in a very small group of women that were actually taking the kind of risk to do aerobatics. And getting in touch with that side of me, that part of me that's really a risk taker, that's really an adventurer, that really likes to push the envelope on things, helped me realize that this is what I can do better than anybody else, right? This is something that is unique to me, that I'm passionate about, that I am helping women with, because as I, go through my coaching, this is really what I'm helping women with. And I thought, well, I'm just going to call myself a risk taking coach because that's really what I'm all about. So I don't know whether it's a thing or not, but it's my thing. And it's really what makes it lights me up, and it really lights me up to help women with it because it's so important. And so many women, just need that a little bit of help and support doing it.
I love your story. This story of a pilot, taking the risks and transform that into your business. It's awesome. I really like it. And when it comes to your business and when it comes to branding, it's all about, and when it comes to women and starting a business at all, right? It's about daring to do something, having the courage to do something. And that ties also nicely into your story because your brand is also about that story. You are
Absolutely.
showcasing actually others how you are taking of we're taking risks and now integrate that into your brand. And you took this other risk because at the beginning you were not daring to use daring in your name, right? You're taking the risk to rebrand. You did that just recently. How was that for you? Because rebranding, there's always risk involved. Does the audience take that new brand? Do we confuse the audience with this rebranding, or are we really clear and better position ourselves with who we are at the moment? So, what was that risk for you, and how did you conquer that? That you were just at this moment in the here and now ready to change your name?
Well, that's a great question because it is always a risk to change your brand. You put something out in the market, you worked hard on it, you get attached to it, and then you think, well, but again, it felt like something was missing. And so one of the things that has been a guiding principle for me during this whole process is when I feel like something is missing, I get that feeling in my gut. And, intuition is really important to me. I get that feeling in my gut, something is missing. I need something different. And I liked my brand before because I was talking about transcendence and living a life of meaning, which the living a life of meaning part is still a big part of my brand, right? It's not like I've thrown the whole thing out, and I still have daring to transcend because I love the word transcend. Transcend means to rise above, to exceed limitations, to surpass the norms, right? And that's what we want to do. So transcend is perfect. I didn't want to throw that out, but it just felt like something was missing from the brand. And so in brainstorming with different people, and I will say, particularly with Krista Molian, who is just an amazing business coach, she, we were brainstorming and the daring piece of it, came in. And it's like all of a sudden it's just settled with me. Yes, this is the right thing. And so I took the risk to do it because it felt right to me to do it. It felt more aligned with me. It felt easier to explain to the market. And I got more excited about it than my brand. And yes, I've changed my brand a few times since I started. And I think that's kind of part of the normal entrepreneurial journey, right? It takes some trial and error as we put ourselves out there and we find out what resonates not only with us, but the people that we're talking to. So I took the risk to change the brand because it just felt like the right thing to do. And maybe I confused some people, maybe I didn't, I don't know. But, honestly, I didn't care because it just felt like this is the right thing for me. And I have to say, since I've changed the brand, I have felt like there's just a huge expansion going on for me. And I've been connecting with different people and it's been exciting. So I feel like it's totally the right thing to do. And the important thing for me about branding is to get something that really feels right, feels really aligned with yourself, that's really, truly aligned with your true self. And, of course, that's a big part of my brand too.
Yeah, I can really feel that because the energy is different now. You really own it now. And it was, as you see, it was more an expansion rather than a disruption, like a completely different name. It was a rebranding, it was a modification because the look and feel
Yeah.
was still the same. You just added something really powerful to it, I would say. So that has changed. It has become more powerful.
It is. And, and I appreciate your input on that because I know I bounced some ideas off of you as I was going through this and looking at, tweaking the brand name, tweaking the colors a little bit, to your point, making it more powerful. And I think that's really important for women, entrepreneurs and leaders in general is find out what makes you feel powerful, what brings that power and passion and excitement out for you. And that's going to be different things for different people. Not everybody is going to be, daring to transcend, but, like you have a very powerful brand and brand statement with your bold colors and and it's what makes you feel powerful in the world that is really important to bring out.
Yeah. And as you said before, a lot of women or in general, people have troubles expressing themselves as a personal brand. And how do we do that? And this is really, it's powerful. It's full of power because you could really transform or bring to light its true essence, its brilliance, its beauty, the beauty from the inside to the outside. And that's what I love so much about your brand. Yeah.
Thank you.
Karen, you are an author, you are a coach, you are an entrepreneur. So you need to juggle a lot here. So, how do you bring some balance into your work, into your life? And could you give some pieces of advice? You're full of wisdom here to other women who are juggling multiple roles, a role in corporate, a role as a mother, a role as a wife. How do we do that best? It's all going through this uncertainty. So, how do we do that?
Well, for me, what I have really found is, chunking out my time and setting aside time for different things. Like I have to set aside time to be creative, right? Because the writing process isn't something that I can just, squeeze in here or there. I have to set aside time to allow myself to be creative. I have to set aside time where I'm completely unplugged from things to allow that creativity to flow. I tell the story about discovering power, and I know we're going to get to this, but when I left corporate, wanted to write a book. I started writing a book and it was terrible. It was really terrible. And the inspiration for discovering power actually came when I was out taking a walk one day. It was a beautiful day. I was out taking a walk. I was listening to music. I wasn't thinking about the book. And all of a sudden, I started getting inspiration for the book. One of the things I think that we women in particular, but I think everybody in today's world doesn't do enough of is set aside that time where we can just be unplugged. We can just allow our imaginations to run wild. We can just clear our heads of our to do list and our, you know, planning and all of that stuff because to really be creative, you have to let some of the stuff go. So for me, it's creating the balance of allowing creative time in my life, but also then, other times where it's disciplined and you block out the time. Okay, I'm going to do these things this day. Of course, always leaving time for what unexpected comes up as well. And I have to admit, I'm somebody who, if something else comes up, like this trip to the Dominican Republic. It's like you have to be present and take those opportunities. So it's a balancing. It's really setting aside time to plan, be disciplined, to do what needs to be done, but also allowing room for creativity and spontaneity and not getting so caught up in the planning and details that you lose sight of living.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think when we are in this mode of we have to do this and tick off the list, it's so hard to allow yourself some me time, some time where some downtime. You just, enjoy reading a book or just doing nothing. It's really hard to do that. So for me, it's hard because I think there's always something to do out there. You cannot just sit still. But we have to, in order to receive again, to get out of this box and allow ourselves to be creative because creativity comes only in when you allow the place to be creative. Yeah.
Exactly. No, exactly.
Talking about creativity, talking about being an author, and talking about, it takes time to come up with something. We have this writer's block sometimes. You cannot just say, now I'm writing. It's 2 o'clock. It's the time to write between 2 and 3. It doesn't always work like that. So your latest novel is coming out now in May. And I'm really excited because it's such an inspiring book for all women leaders and to dare to take the risk to own it. So the book, the first of the Ascending Ladder series, it's a trilogy, right? Yeah. So what made you write Discovering Power in the first place? Why did you write this book?
Well, I wanted to write a book about leadership, particularly women's leadership. And as I said, I started out trying to write nonfiction, and it was awful. It was just a mess. And it was boring. It was boring even to me. And I'm like, okay, and nobody's going to read this because it's really boring. And then I got the idea. I started to hear Cheryl's story when I was on that walk. And I thought, well, this is cool. What if I imagine, right? What could be, what she could do, what she struggles with, and bring it out through a fictional character in a way that allowed me to talk about situations I dealt with, situations my friends were dealing with, situations, I read around the news. I could bring in a lot of context and different stories and different perspectives through fiction, right? Because there's Cheryl's perspective, but then you also get, even though Discovering Power is told only through Cheryl's point of view, in her conversations with people, you get her husband's perspective, you get her boss's perspective, you get some of her employees' perspective, right? So you can get different angles on the same conversation and how different people are looking at them. And for me, that allowed me to really explore the nuances of situations. Because let's face it, the world is not black and white. There are not always clear-cut answers, and everybody has their view on things. And it was fun to write fiction and be able to, get different viewpoints and get different perspectives on the same situation. And some people thought, okay, it's this way. And other people thought, no, it's this way. And Cheryl is stuck in the middle because she's getting bombarded from all sides with all these different points of view. And she knows in her gut, and we'll talk about, because one of the things in her discovering power is trying to figure out, okay, how much do I trust my gut? How much do I trust my intuition? Which I think we all struggle with. So she has to figure that out. And she knows in her gut that something is wrong. And she's not necessarily happy with any of the other points of view she's getting. But what is her point of view, right? What is her point of view and what does she want to do? And that's really what the story is about, is her knowing that things are wrong and she doesn't agree with what's going on in her company. She's getting bombarded with other people's opinions about what she should do or shouldn't do, or yada. And she's okay. Part of her just wants to walk away. Okay, I'm out of here. I don't want to deal with this, right? Which we all have that. And then part of her is going, but I have responsibilities. I don't know that I can walk away. So how do I make the best of the situation? And it was a fun way to bring out the real emotional and mental struggles that people have around difficult workplace issues, like layoffs, which is a trigger point of the book. There's layoffs at the beginning of the book, and that's a trigger point. And how do you deal with that as a leader, as a staff member, as a spouse? How do we navigate those situations? And so it was really fun to allow Cheryl to explore and then be able to be creative with the solutions.
Yeah, yeah.
And I love Cheryl's creativity, and I'm not going to give away the story of how she's creative.
But what I really loved about your book so much is, first of all, the great dialogues that you have, because I could put myself in this situation. I was in this story. I was part of the whole thing. And the nuances in the situations from everyone on a specific, a situation. And it's just the emotions that you could bring across, the emotions and the stress. I really enjoyed that. And also, especially for Cheryl. So what will I do now in this situation, and how she figured it out? And now, based on the book and also your own experiences in life, how can that help women overcome this very often, this self-doubt in such a situation? Because now we have to react in a certain way to a certain situation, or we have to lead into. How can we own it? How can we, in order to own it, overcome self-doubt or imposter syndrome and gain the confidence to walk the talk? And despite all the other influences, hey, don't do that because of this and that. And it would be wrong if you're not doing it. But you go for it, you do it. How can you go through this fear and go and arrive on the other side and being proud of yourself? I did it. I owned it. I have the power. So how do we do that?
Well, it's a process, okay? You're not going to wake up and do that necessarily overnight. But, one of the things is, and I think for myself, and I touched on this earlier, the whole idea of really getting in touch with your inner self, getting in touch with your intuition, really getting aligned with who you are. And for instance, when I'm working with my clients, I have three pillars of how we work together. And one of them is looking at your beliefs and conditioning, right? Because, there's a lot of beliefs and cultural conditioning to have you conform and do what other people want you to do. So you've got to take a hard look at those things, right? So you have to understand what beliefs you have that are holding you back. The second thing I work with people on is clarity. What really matters to you? I find it really fascinating for a lot of women in particular, but I think there's men that this applies to also, is sometimes we don't even allow ourselves to acknowledge what really matters to us. We'll say, people used to ask me the question, well, what do you think about this? Or what do you want to do? And I would say, well, I don't know. And it wasn't really that I didn't know. It was really that I was afraid to say, this is what I want. Because if you say that, then you're in a position where, okay, now you have to decide whether to act on it. So a lot of times, a lot of women in particular will say, I don't know. It's like I told the story about, I knew a long time ago that I needed to be a risk-taking coach, but I didn't follow through on that, even though I knew that was the truth, because it didn't feel like it was, normal or conventional, right? And we get stuck in that. And so getting really in touch with what really matters to us is really critical, and being honest with ourselves about that. And the third thing is learning to trust ourselves, right? Trusting ourselves, trusting in the unknown, trusting that when we take a step forward in our power, that we're going to get back more than we're putting out there. And that's totally been my experience. You talk about the brand change I just made. I took a leap. I had to trust myself. I had to trust that this was the right thing to do. And the response that I'm getting, even though it's only been a short time, has been, fantastic. And doors are opening for me that weren't before, because I really stepped forward with trust, and I stepped forward with alignment with myself. I looked at my limiting beliefs, I looked at what was important, and then I trusted and took the step. So those are the three things that, you have to do. But it's a process. It's a process. And that's how I work with my clients, and that's how I work for myself. And those are the steps that you need to take to get to really owning your power.
Yeah. I think it also has a little bit to do with vulnerability, because if you are looking at it and going on this self-discovery measure, and then acknowledging what really matters for you, is also opening up and showing some vulnerability to the world. And how can we overcome this first opening up of this thing? Now I'm vulnerable because I'm showing myself as a person. Because when you're owning it, when you're coming up with solutions as a leader, or when you're leading your team towards something that is not the norm, it's scary because you're opening up. You're showing this vulnerability. So how do we deal with that in the first phase when you are starting taking action?
Well, so I have a risk-taking talk that I give to a lot of women's groups, and I give 4 tips, so I will share the 4 tips with your audience today. So the 4 tips for taking that risk is: 1, being really connected with why. Really connected with why you want to take the risk. What do you love about it? Because I always say love is going to conquer fear any day of the week. But we sometimes get disconnected from that love, from that passion. And so the first step is to really get connected with your why, which at the core of your why is going to be love. The second thing is to take a really hard look at your reasons for not doing it. So I always challenge people: do you have valid reasons for not doing something? And you might. I'm not saying that there aren't valid reasons. Or are you making excuses?
Yeah.
And you know what? We as human beings are really awesome at making excuses. So the second tip is, you know, you got to take a hard look at that. And oftentimes that means bouncing it off with somebody else because we sometimes can really convince ourselves that our excuses are totally valid and they're really not. And then the third thing is to get very present to the cost of not taking the risk, of not doing it. What's it going to cost you not to do it? And we often look at what's it going to cost me if I do it, right? What if something goes wrong? We spend a lot of time looking at the cost of potential cost of doing it. But we often don't look at the cost of not doing it.
Yeah.
What's it going to cost you? What's it going to cost? What's the emotional angst it's going to cost you? What's the inner conflict with your value system? Is it going to cost you? What is the regret that you're going to have about not taking it? So really getting very present to the cost is super important. And then the final step is to take small steps, right? Just, you don't have to do everything all at once. Sometimes you get to the point where you finally have to take the leap, but usually there's a number of steps that lead up to. And as I always say, and I talked about this a minute ago, when you trust, when you're aligned with yourself, when you're aligned with, the universe or universal consciousness, or however you want to, look at the intelligent power in the world, the energy in the world, when you're aligned with all of that and you take that step forward, trust me, the universe is going to take 10 steps towards you.
Yeah.
But that's part of trusting, right? It's trusting yourself, but it's also trusting that when you are stepping out in alignment, that there's going to be a reciprocal energy coming back. However you look at that energy. And I know different people have different beliefs about it. It doesn't really matter what your belief specifically is, as long as you're trusting that when you're stepping forward in alignment, you're going to get that energy back.
Yeah. I think those
And
are
so those are my 4 tips for building your risk-taking muscles.
exactly wonderful. Every woman leader out there who is confronted with making a decision, take these 4 action steps, right, in
Yeah.
that specific order to really figure out, am I doing the right thing here? And do I really
Yeah.
own? And I think the worst thing that can happen, and we only know it once we are about to die, but looking back at our life, a lot of people would say, I should have done it. And we don't want to end up like this. So, what is the opportunity cost here? What is really the cost of not doing it?
Yeah.
I like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is a book for women leaders, but what about men? Do men learn also something in this book?
They do, because I've had quite a few men that have read the book. I've had a few people pre-read it, as you know, you're being one of them. But I have had men read the book and they get a lot out of it too, because there are male points of view in the book. Obviously, there are male characters. And I think, we all can relate to what Cheryl went through. What she goes through, I don't think is really specific to women. I think women struggle with it often a little bit more than men because they don't necessarily have as much permission to show up the same way that men do. But at the same time, men have the same internal struggles. Her struggles are universal. So I think men can get just as much out of it as women. And hopefully, I want everybody to be inspired by the book, inspired to, take action and to, be more in alignment with their values and their true selves.
Yeah. And there's one more thing that is also really interesting because when you are really there and when you are owning it and making the decision based on your gut and your instinct and sticking to your values and being vulnerable, and you're climbing the career ladder, you're also adjusting somehow relationships with former superiors who are now your colleagues, and you have more people to lead. So, how do you cope with these changes? Is there any last tip that you can give us?
Well, again, I think it's really learning to trust yourself. It really comes down to learning to trust yourself. And you do have to navigate. We want to think one of the myths, I'll just say, of, trusting yourself and being yourself is that you're exactly the same in every situation. And that obviously is a myth. You express your true self in every situation, but sometimes it's only aspects of it, right? We're not the same in every situation. It doesn't mean that we're not aligned or we're being fake. It just means that we appropriately show ourselves and we appropriately show up on different situations. So, one of the things that Cheryl has to navigate is showing up in different situations in a different way based on her role and her relationship with the people that she's dealing with. And we all have to do that. And so it's being true to yourself, but also modulating that so that it's appropriate for the situation you're in. And I'm not sure that that's not necessarily always easy to do, but we don't have to put ourselves out there the same way in every situation. It doesn't mean we're being fake. It just means that we're showing up appropriately in different situations, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. And we only can do so if we have first a look inside before we
Oh,
are
absolutely.
up to the outside world. All right. Is there anything that we forgot to talk?
I don't think so. I think we've done a great job of covering it. I just really want to remind people if they're interested in the book, they can go to ascendingladders.com and enter the free giveaway. So I'm giving away some autographed copies of the book. So there'll be a drawing for that. So if they sign up Ascending Ladders, they'll get all the information about this book, the other books in the series. They'll be entered in for the free drawing. And they'll also get notified of some events that are coming up, including a 3-day virtual retreat next week for women leaders to dive into some of the themes from Discovering Power, including things we've been talking about as risk-taking, integrity, intuition. Those are the 3 big themes of the retreat next week. I would love to have people join us for that because it's going to be just an intimate group, small intimate group of women. And so we can go dive deep into some of the things we're talking about today.
All right. It's going to be in the show notes. Before we round it up for today, I would like to do a quick word rapid fire term.
Uh-oh.
Ready? No, you have to do it.
I have to do it. All right. Bring it. Bring it.
Okay. It's easy for you, but really short. Either a word or a sentence. Keep it short. Uncertainty.
Opportunity.
Women leadership.
Power, trust, and vulnerability.
Integrity.
Being in alignment with yourself.
Passion.
Excitement, energy, love.
Empowerment.
Owning who you are.
And last but not least, brands.
Self-expression.
Good. Thank you so much. It was such a joy. I'm so honored you're my guest today. I think we covered a lot of really important topics when it comes to discovering power. I'm so happy for you. I'm so proud of you about your book launch. You're just inspiring all the women around the world who really want to take the next step and leap and climb up the career ladder. So thank you so much for being my guest today.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a fun time as always. I love our conversations and, I appreciate you really having me and helping me get this important message out in the world.
Thank you